Hello, welcome to On-Course Equine Nutrition's Forage First lecture. My name is Natalie Sullivan, and I'm the owner and equine nutritionist at On-Course Equine Nutrition. Tonight, we are talking about preventing ulcers, a topic that is likely top of mind for you, your friends, and everybody you know with horses. It certainly is for me and the clients that I work with. I'm going to be talking tonight about forage first decisions in the prevention of uh, gastric ulcers or ulceration really anywhere in the stomach because I have a huge passion for forage first decisions. That passion really began decades ago when I first started working in the equine feed industry. I was selling horse feeds and solving some problems, but I really started getting frustrated that I couldn't solve more problems with just feeds and supplements. I really had to understand the bulk of the horse's diet, right? The 99% of their diet to really help them prevent and even treat or cure problems like laminitis and ulcers and myopathy. So with this in mind, I went about trying to design a pelleted forage product because I, again, worked for a feed company and that's what we did. But in pursuit of that forage product that soon came to be Equistef Natural and is still available on the market today, I called up a forage extension specialist in the state of Washington. His name is Dr. Steve Franson, and he is still one of my top 3 favorite people on the entire planet. That man is going to forget more about forages than I'm going to learn, but I did learn a lot in the 4 years that we studied how to make low carb hay. And I very much immersed myself in the forage industry for that amount of time and beyond. And I really honed in on my understanding of forages and how they contribute to our horse's diet, which I think is very, very sadly lacking in today's understanding of horse diets and in many recommendations. So we are recording tonight. If you enjoy this lecture, please consider becoming an OCEN community member. For only $30 a year, you will have access to all of our past lectures, both ones that I've made as well as our many, many guest lectures, literally from around the world. This year, we're adding guest lectures from Canada and Italy who are masters in their topics. So if you're interested in that, go to membership at encourseequinenutrition.com, join for only $30 a year, and then go to member resources. And that huge library of guest lecture recordings, including this one, will be there. So let's get started. What I'm going to talk to you about today is one big idea, the prevention of ulceration in the horse's digestive system. Within that big idea, that big nutrition goal of preventing ulcers, I'm going to talk about 2 principles, and we're going to start with those 2 principles. We're going to end with 3 steps that all address preventing gastric ulcers with forage first decisions. And at the end, we're going to be able to see this much bigger picture that is our horse's diet and how it contributes or prevents ulceration or dysbiosis in the horse's digestive tract. So let's get started. Principle number 1. I'm just going to come out and say it. This is a really hard topic to talk about, but I make myself do it with every client and every horse's diet plan that I'm looking at. We talk about sources of stress. And we know that stress, our horses become stressed in a wide variety of ways, regardless of how much we love them, how much money we spend on them. um, stress it. So my first principle, the first thing that I want you to think about before jumping into the purchase of the latest and greatest ulcer supplement, okay, and spending thousands of dollars a year on these things, I want you to think very, very seriously about being a third-party auditor of your horse's daily stress. I know, we love them. We love them so much. We believe in our hearts there's no way that we can be contributing to our horse's stress, but trust me, it does. And it's something I'm constantly thinking about as we're talking about the management practices of the horses that I create diet plans for, because I think it's that important. There's so many sources of stress, not just their diet, but their environment, what kind of, facility they're at. There's other horses around, the heat, the cold, performance, higher levels of intensity, and competition certainly will contribute to ulcers, but actually the horses that stay home and don't go to competition, we find have ulcers as well. We know that medications contribute, and lots of what I call modern day horse management is actually quite ulcer friendly, unfortunately. And what I mean by that is we're isolating horses, we're consolidating them into small spaces and where they don't get a lot of exercise, they don't get a lot of other playtime or touch time with other horses, and we make them quite sedentary. So for lots and lots of reasons, our modern day horse management is quite ulcer friendly, and I really think it behooves us to get an outside opinion, not your trainer, not your friend, not the person next door, but maybe a veterinarian or a nutritionist or, consult, or maybe even a body worker, somebody who comes in from the outside and can look at the big picture. You know, is there some sort of change, or even a big change, that can help facilitate less stress, less ulcer risk in your horse? I will tell you, I've had several consultations where the ulcers are so bad. They're what I call boomerang ulcers. They keep coming back. You do an ulcer treatment, it works for a little bit and the ulcers come back. And that happens over and over and over again. My question is, how is the environment contributing? If you're in a boarding facility and your horse's ulcers keep coming back, can you be honest with yourself and think of how that environment is contributing? Maybe instead of buying a $300 a month supplement, maybe changing boarding facilities, okay? Or if you have your horse at home and they have no friends, maybe a boarding facility is the right thing where they can be turned out in a herd group. I don't know. There's a lot to consider. But, in in our pursuit of healthier horses, less stress, less ulcery horses, I think it just really is so important to take a moment and be honest with ourselves about how us and the environment we put our horses in, though it might be, the best thing for us, maybe it's a short drive to that boarding facility, maybe it's a lot cheaper than, the boarding facility 30 minutes farther away. But if your horse is in an environment that is ulcer friendly, maybe it would behoove you to think outside the box. Can you pay somebody to ride your horse more and get more exercise? Can you change facilities? Okay, you understand what I'm saying here. But be honest with this number one principle about preventing ulcers. Before you click purchase on that next ulcer supplement, please consider and be honest with yourself where your horse's stress is coming from. If you want more information about this big idea, this idea of how stress weakens our horse's immune system and therefore may contribute to ulcers, you can go to member resources at encourseequinenutrition.com. If you're a community member, again, you have access to these recordings, all of them. The effects of leaky gut syndrome on equine performance with Kemin Equine was just this last fall. And then the equine immune system and why it matters with Dr. Helena Carner. All those lectures are there and talk more about the immune system, stress, and prevention of gastric ulcers. Okay, enough about that. An important principle, but we're on very quickly to number two. Principle number two. Here's what we're going to be trying to do in the next 3 steps. We are going to be trying to increase the number of hours chewing long stem forage. And I know you guys get this principle quite easily. You understand the underlying meaning, but why? Why do we want to increase the number of hours chewing long stem forage? I believe it's the very first step towards preventing gastric ulcers. Period. End of sentence. Okay, besides the stress point. But horses were designed, they evolved out on the plains, right? Where they would be, walking along the plains, munching on low quality forage. That's important when we get into the steps. Munching on low quality forage throughout the day as they walked and grazed. Okay. And so their digestive system evolved to have small amounts of low quality forage going through it all the time. Okay. So this is a huge step towards forage first prevention of gastric ulcers. Now, how we go about increasing your horse's number of hours chewing long stem forage is the topic of the next many, many slides. Okay, because it's not as simple as it sounds. So step number 1 towards increasing your horse's number of hours chewing, how much is to understand how much forage your horse should be eating. Okay, what is normal for their size, their activity level, their life stage, and then how do we manipulate that number depending on various factors like forage quality, like your horse's activity level, like fitting it into the management practice of the barn. Lots to consider here. So this is a very, very important slide. One of the first things I do in every consultation is we calculate intake as a percentage of ideal body weight. Okay, you've probably heard of the 2% rule. Okay, raise your hand if you've heard the 2% rule, which states on average, we have figured out that on average, if you pooled the entire horse population in the world, gave them the average quality forage, they're the average size and the average activity level, they would consume about 2% of their ideal body weight per day. Okay, that's averaged out throughout the year. Now, this number okay, here's an example of that. And the next principle you need to understand is that in calculating the total intake of your horse per day, that is everything. So that is pasture plus hay plus feeds and supplements. So for example, if this horse is out on, moderate quality grass for 8 hours a day, maybe we assume he's getting about 8.5 pounds of grass per day. We add that to the 10 pounds of hay that we throw them at night when they come into their stalls, and we add the let's say we're feeding them a simple ration balancer. We're going to add that to the total intake. Now I've made the math here super simple to make myself look smart, look like I actually know what I'm doing with math. But it is a simple calculation. All of these sources of food, okay, the horse's total daily intake in this example is 20 pounds. Okay, so keep that number in mind. Now, we're going to start simple at the 2% rule, and we're going to start with the ideal example, the ideal average horse, which is 1,000 pounds in light work, and your nutrition goal is for that horse's body condition score to stay the same. So what's 2% of that 1,000 pounds? That's 20 pounds per day. 20 pounds per day is what we would expect the average normal horse to eat in all of its food sources, pasture, hay, feeds, and supplements, okay, on average throughout the day. This is the average horse. We start with the 2% rule when we don't know the other factors. So for example, let's say, I'm lucky enough to have your horse just appear in my paddocks tomorrow, and I know nothing about it. I don't know the horse's history. I don't know the horse's preferences. I don't know what they were eating before. That first night, when I have zero information, I'm just going to feed them 2% of their body weight. I'm going to take a weight tape. I'm going to weigh them, body condition score them, and then I'll take 2% of that. And that will be a good, safe number to start with. It's an excellent starting point, this 2% rule. Now, Once you start, looking at variable horses, when you start looking at skinny horses, fat horses, easy keepers, hard keepers, horses on different kinds of forage, different activity levels, different management practices, there's infinite possibilities here. Now we start manipulating this 2% rule, okay? But before I go any further, I want you to understand that what number, what intake total we ultimately give our horses is chosen first and foremost for calories. Okay. Basically, what we're doing is we are formulating a horse's diet first and foremost on its caloric requirement. Okay. We make all the following decisions that we're going to be talking about here based on the horse's caloric need, okay? For example, we might choose limited intake, which means we limit how much our horses eat per day. We feed them, 2 flakes in the morning, 2 flakes at night, for example, or we free choice. And free choicing is when horses have unlimited access to forages, like the horses on the left, right? They have this huge, gorgeous, beautiful pasture. And on top of that, they have a round bale. That is a free choice. Versus the horses on the right, these horses are likely being what we call forced fed or have limited intake, where they are given a certain amount per day. Now, which one we choose is going to depend on the horse's caloric needs. Okay, do they need to gain weight, lose weight, or stay the same? And other factors like their life stage and activity level and whatnot. Okay, now I'm just building a foundation of education here, and everything's going to continue to click together like a little puzzle. So right now, the first principle you need to know is calculating how to calculate intake as a percentage of ideal body weight. Okay, that number is going to lead us to increasing our horse's time chewing. Okay, so the bridge between preventing gastric ulcers and also preventing our horses from being obese, okay, is forage quality. So if our forage is very high quality and our horse is fat, okay, that's a problem, right? Because very high quality forage cannot be free choiced, cannot be given limitless amounts to a horse that is overweight, or they are going to become obese. And that comes with a whole host of problems, one of which is laminitis and founder, which is horrible. Horrible, horrible disease. I'm very sensitive to horses' risk for laminitis because I see it every day. And I will tell you that horses die more frequently, more horses are put down for laminitis episodes than ulcers. So I know you want to prevent ulcers in your horse, but you also really, really, really don't want your horse to get laminitis, because that is, in my opinion, far worse. Horses that founder once will likely do it again and again, which leads down to the road of euthanization, and it is horrible. So it is just as big a problem for your horse to be obese as for your horse to have gastric ulcers. To prevent both, we need to know something about forage quality, because we cannot feed a horse 2% of its ideal body weight. We can't feed that ideal amount if our horses are eating forages that are too high calorie dense. Okay, we're going to keep putting this puzzle together. The next puzzle piece is what type of hay is best. And I know what you're thinking. I know you're hoping, your pen is poised. You are hoping I'm going to tell you there is one forage choice that you just have to buy, stack in your barn, and your horse's ulcer problems will be gone. Unfortunately, I am going to tell you the absolute opposite. All of your forage options, every single one, every single type of species of hay that you have available to you is equal in value for me. Okay. They are all equal tools in your toolbox until you put a horse in front of it. And that horse's nutrition goals decides if a forage is good or bad. Now, in the prevention of gastric ulcers, I'm saying, and I'm going to say this over and over again to try to convince you, all forages are equal because they all provide a forage mat or a fiber mat. A horse chews, it salivates. Actually, let me back up. I need to tell you what long stem forage is. I keep mentioning that phrase, but I haven't described it yet. Long stem forage is forage that you give your horse that is at least an inch long. So that is hay, that is pasture, and that is hay cubes. Hay pellets are fully ground and do not provide fiber length. Okay, that's not pellets, fully ground up forage is not going to create this fiber mat that is ideal. This fiber mat goes into the horse's relatively small stomach and literally holds down the very acidic juices from getting up into the non-glandular region of the stomach and wreaking havoc, okay? Or at least irritating all of the irritating any ulcers that might already be there as well. So the fiber mat is what makes long stem forage in your horse's diet important. It's this fiber mat that it is the reason that we want our horses chewing more hours every day. So this fiber mat stays on top of their digesta, on top of the digestive juices, and keeps things from splashing around. Okay, so that's a really, really important idea to keep in mind. Now, all your hays are going to do this. And this is why all species of forage are equal. What those forage species are not equal in is calories, okay? And calories are the number one reason you choose a forage, period, end of sentence. Very important concept that nobody fully grasps. Okay, so I'm going to say it again. You choose one of these forages based on its caloric density and how it matches the horse. Most of my slides from here on out are going to be explaining this. And trust me, this is step number 2 of 3 that are all going to come together and click together like a puzzle to help you prevent gastric ulcers in your horse's diet. Okay, so visualize this fiber mat. All forages are equal when it comes to preventing ulcers. They're not equal in their caloric density. And that's kind of the next thing I'm going to show you. There was something else that I thought was really, really important. Okay. Here's how this principle of, understanding the quality of the forage is going to help you feed that horse a higher intake per day and therefore keep your horse chewing long stem fiber more hours a day. Okay, you seeing how this is all starting to march into place? Okay. So understanding the caloric density of your horse's primary forage, whether that be hay or pasture, is all about understanding the carbohydrate profile. Now, I've talked a lot about carbohydrates in past guest lectures. I have 3 low-carb horse hay videos that are available under member resources that all 3 of them just talk about carbohydrates. So I'm not going to talk about it a lot here. But the one carbohydrate number that I am going to talk about here is acid detergent fiber, ADF. It's a really cool number that shows up on every forage test you ever do. And it is the best estimate of how a forage is going to behave in your horse. Is that forage going to make your horse gain weight, lose weight, or stay the same? The fiber values tell us that, not non-structural carbohydrates, okay? Everybody wants to know the forage's non-structural carbohydrate level. And yeah, that's all great and well, but those are usually less than 20%, less than 10% of the total forage. The majority of that hay or pasture your horse is getting is mostly fiber. And it's 40, 60% fiber. So those fiber numbers play a much, much bigger role in estimating how a forage is going to behave in your horse. This is all leading us to preventing gastric ulcers. Okay, I promise. So, fiber values, just real quick. I don't have a lot of time to dive into this, but I want you to understand this is what the fiber values look like on a forage test. And this acid detergent fiber number, if we go over to dry matter percentage, it's 31.9. That's quite low. And as fiber values go down, you can imagine the digestibility of that forage goes up, right? I'll say it again. As fiber levels go down, white bread versus whole wheat bread, okay, the digestibility goes up, therefore the caloric density goes up. Now, the coolest number on the forage test, and this is my all-time favorite number, I write about it a lot in my articles. It's my favorite number to teach horse owners, is at the very bottom of the forage test, and this is relative feed value, okay? The relative feed value on this test is RFV. That relative feed value has a lot of history. A lot of equine nutritionists don't use it, but with my forage background, I find this to be the most meaningful number on a forage test, and it's going to help you the most deciding what forage is the best match for my horse and therefore going to do the best job preventing gastric ulcers. Okay, so if looking at a forage test makes your brain do this, then call me. Okay, this is what equine nutritionists do. This is what I do every day is try to make these assumptions about the quality of the forage and how it's contributing to your horse's diet. But I will help you understand relative feed value a little bit more by breaking all forages into three groups, three types of hay. I don't care what species they are. I don't care what cutting they are. We are going to categorize them by their relative feed value. And this is really important. If a forage is over 100 relative feed value, like this one you saw before, right? 106 relative feed value. If your forage is over 100 relative feed value, that implies that it is very high calorie. That is what I call weight gain hay. Can you feed a fat mini, free choice, high over 100 relative feed value hay to prevent ulcers? No, right? This is my example of a forage being a mismatch. If you have an overweight horse that you have to limit intake and you're trying to prevent gastric ulcers, do not buy high relative feed value hay because that's like giving candy to a diabetic, right? And it's like giving hamburgers and ice cream and really high calorie dense feedstuffs to a diabetic or somebody who's obese. This is not the right forage for your horse. You need higher fiber values. The next category of relative feed value is between 90 and 100. The vast majority of like grass hays that you buy, especially Timothy, the reason everybody loves Timothy so much for big barns is because it's like almost always like right in the middle, 95 relative feed value, and it fits a lot of different horses. If you get hay with a relative feed value between 90 and 100, this is what I call stay the same hay. For the vast majority of, average normal horses who don't change weight that much, or, these horses that are in light to moderate work, they get lots of exercise, they're generally healthy. You can feed 2% of that horse's body weight of the average horse eating this average quality hay with a relative feed value between 90 and 100. Now, here's what I shop for the most. A lot of my clients have overweight easy keepers. The owner is stressed because they can't feed their horse very much hay, which we know is important to preventing ulcers. We want to increase time chewing, but their horse is also overweight. The bridge between those two problems is buying lower quality feedstuffs, okay? If you find a hay with a relative feed value below 90, this is what I call weight loss hay, okay? This is hay that the average horse doing the average work would lose weight at 2% intake. Okay. So the lower the, let me see, make sure this is concise. The higher the fiber values, the lower the relative feed value, the more of that that diet hay we can give to our horses so they can eat maybe close to that 2% intake or even greater. Okay. So there's a huge, huge advantage to stocking your barn with, quote, lower quality, which in my world means lower calorie hay for your easy keepers. They can eat more, which means they're chewing, salivating, okay, swallowing long stem fiber, creating that mat, that fiber mat inside their stomach, and suppressing all the gastric juices that would otherwise aggravate gastric ulcers. I hope this is starting to click for you. I know this is a new concept, very, very new concept for most, because we just don't get this sort of forage education out there in the real world, and I'm trying to give you a lot at once. But to summarize this slide again, very, very important. Step number 2, in order to be able to feed your horse more and have them chewing longer, more hours per day, we have to match the forage quality to the horse. If you find the relative feed value to be over 100, that is weight gain hay. The average horse will gain weight when fed ad libitum on that. If you find a forage with a relative feed value between 90 and 100, that is stay the same hay for the average horse. Less than 90 relative feed value, that is what I call weight loss hay, aka dieting hay. That is like feeding your children celery sticks, okay? They can eat more without gaining weight, but that more volume helps prevent gastric ulcers, okay? All right. I don't want to beat the horse here, but here's another slide. Here's a chart for all you numbers folks, okay, about fiber values and relative feed value. So notice here I have 4 species of grass hay, okay, or 4 species of hay. We've got teff grass hay, mixed meadow grass hay, and then alfalfa pellets and legume hay, which is basically all alfalfa hay, okay? And we see that as the fiber value, the ADF, acid detergent fiber, as those fiber values go down, the relative feed value goes down, okay? Or excuse me, the relative feed value goes up. So again, the more fibrous a product gets, like the teff grass hay, the lower the relative feed value, and therefore the more diet-like hay it is. Okay. I know what a lot of you are thinking. You're all thinking, what about alfalfa? We hear that alfalfa is the end-all be-all forage for any horse with gastric ulcers. And I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but it's not. It's not. I get this all the time. Um, Everybody and their uncle thinks that, oh, if I want to prevent gastric ulcers, I have to feed alfalfa hay. And please, please understand that alfalfa, I love alfalfa. Alfalfa is an awesome tool in our toolbox. The advantage and disadvantage of alfalfa is that it's very, very high calorie, usually about 20% more calories per bite than your average grass hay. So if you're trying to increase the total volume, the total intake of hay of your horse, alfalfa does not help you towards that. It is too high in calories for horses over a body condition score of 6. Okay. Way too many calories for the overweight easy keeper. And okay, alfalfa is equal in the stomach. Yes, it creates that fiber mat, but I'm sorry, the high calcium in alfalfa and the low carb value of alfalfa is not going to help your horse stomach. Okay, it might help in other nutrition goals. It's not that calcium in alfalfa is not going to spontaneously combust in the stomach and buffer your horse's stomach. It's the fiber, it's the long stem physical fiber that's buffering your horse's stomach, and all forages do that equally, right? So my point is, please, please do not feed alfalfa to your horse if you're trying to increase number of hours chewing and to prevent gastric ulcers. Alfalfa is very much appropriate for the horses with good body weights, okay? Because horses love it. It's very palatable. Yes, it's low carb. It balances grass hays nicely. There's so many wonderful, wonderful traits of alfalfa. But remember what I said at the beginning, we feed a hay or don't feed a hay because of its caloric density first. I wish I could expand on that more, but we only have limited time. But please do not feed alfalfa if your horse is overweight to try to prevent ulcers. It's not a magic ingredient that way. Okay, quick thought. If your horse has boomerang ulcers, the ones that come back, come back, come back, and you can't get in control of it, I do suggest changing the species of hay. Because you never know. Sometimes there's ways that the farmer is growing that hay, whether or not he puts, fertilizer on it or insecticide or conditioner, any of those things. Regardless, there are very natural things that grow on grass plants, and every species and every region of the country kind of has its own microbiome. Plants have their own microbiome too that live on the, outside and that are of the plant, and the horses are eating all this plant microbiome along with the green grass. So sometimes I suspect that a horse's digestive system is adverse to what's, the plant's different carbohydrate profile, different microbiome. So a very simple thing to try is to just simply change the forage that your horse is feeding, hopefully to a more appropriate calorie dense forage as well. Okay, and I can certainly help you with that if that's super confusing. The final step, the last step in preventing gastric ulcers by increasing time chewing, is to understand our use of slow feed devices. And I consider slow feed devices one of many tools in our nutritional toolbox. But I have a warning for you. I find horse owners misusing slow feed devices all the time because they don't understand this very important concept. The purpose of a slow feed device is to increase time chewing, salivating, and buffering the stomach while also decreasing daily total caloric intake. So let's break that down, okay? Please understand that I'm fully aware that lots of people use slow feed devices like hay nets, for example, for convenience. They're using them to keep the stall clean, to keep their horse from pawing, to, keep our horses from dragging the hay out and lying and urinating on it and all those things. That's different. If you are using a slow feed device for convenience and to keep things clean, totally cool with that. However, most of us, when we go buy a slow feed device, are trying to increase time chewing. And here's what's important about this. Here's the mistake I see over and over again. You only need a slow feed device if the forage you're feeding your horse is not a good match. Okay? Exhibit A, right in the middle, this very cute little overweight Cremello type pony. If this horse, what I have on this chart is an illustration of 3 horses eating the exact same hay. Okay, the exact same hay. They're eating 2% of their ideal body weight. So let's just say they're all 1,000 pounds and they're all eating 20 pounds of this hay. This pony in the middle, eating that 20 pounds of average hay, is going to exceed its caloric requirement by 112%. If you feed this horse 20 pounds a day, it's getting too many calories. That is the horse that we need to limit intake on. That is the horse that we decrease from 2% of its body weight, maybe down to 1.5, 1.6% of its body weight intake. Now we're only feeding it 15 or 16 pounds per day. We're limiting the intake, but now that's a very appropriate time to use our slow feed devices like grazing muzzles, slow feed hay nets, even automated hay feeders, okay? That's the situation that requires a slow feed device when the forage is not a good match. Now, to continue this idea, this horse on the right, okay, this horse on the right eating 2% or 20 pounds of this exact same hay just perfectly meets its caloric requirement for whatever reason. Its level of work, its metabolism, its age, whatever. Eating 2% of the body weight, that's perfect. Do we need a slow feed device? Absolutely not. All right, this horse can do well without one. If it makes you feel better, sure. Slow feed hay net. If it keeps your stall clean, sure, that's fine. But let's be clear about why we use these things. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, the chestnut, the skinny chestnut on the left, if we feed him 20 pounds of the same hay, now he's not meeting his caloric requirement for whatever reason. He's a upper level eventer, galloping, 3 days a week. He's a racehorse. He's young. Maybe he has a special need, poor teeth, whatever. That 20 pounds is not meeting his need. So, do you use a slow feed device for this horse? Absolutely not, right? A slow feed device would be a horrible choice for this horse because a slow feed device is going to even further decrease their intake, further decrease their caloric intake. So, and you guys, I've seen this happen over several times. I see skinny horses being fed hay in, maybe even low quality hay in slow feed devices, and people wonder why their horse is skinny. Okay, this horse needs more, so we don't want to restrict their intake. And I should have said this earlier and shown you some pictures of what I consider to be a slow feed device. So in this category, I certainly consider grazing muzzles, slow feed hay nets with less than 2 inches, really more like less than 1.5 inches diameter holes, and then also automated hay feeders. I'm a big fan of them. They're very expensive to put in. Um, Not always, they take time and management, of course, but automated hay feeders are a really cool option to feed your horse more hours throughout the day, less hours without long stem forage. Okay. And this is just an example. I had a slam dunk, problem solving situation where this horse actually did best on 100% alfalfa, but the horse was eating so little intake each day that she was really aggressive and had negative behaviors and ulcers and lots of bad things because the intake was off. The forage did not match the horse's caloric needs, so the horse had very limited intake. We introduced a slow feed feeder because the person was gone working many hours during the day, and the horse's behavior chart changed immediately. Huge success just by installing a automated hay feeder. So ultimately, what we would like in the perfect world where we had infinite options, infinite choices, okay, our horses would be out acres and acres with free choice hay. But the reality is that most of us are buying forage that is too high in calories for our horses' need, and so we have to restrict intake. Okay, here's the big takeaways tonight. I know I've given you a ton of information, and hopefully I've given you some supplemental resources at the bottom of each page. You can go back, rewind, see what those resources are, find them at my website, oncourseequinenutrition.com under articles. But our big goal in this discussion was to make choices, make forage first decisions that prevent gastric ulcers. We're going to check all of these things off of our box before we go purchase that ulcer supplement. Okay. Our two big principles were to decrease stress, and number two was to increase time chewing. The three ways that we increase time chewing long stem forage appropriate to the horse and nutrition goals is we understand how much they should be eating, what amount of intake actually helps them prevent gastric ulcers. And then we understand the forage quality to be able to give them higher intake. And then three, when we understand finally that our forages do not match the need, when the caloric density is too high for the horse to be eating a lot of volume, then we incorporate our slow feed devices like grazing muzzles, slow feed hay nets that are small diameter holes, and automated hay feeders. Okay. Hopefully this is clicking for you, all coming together, and you're seeing the big picture, the big puzzle with all of its pieces here that are Forage First decisions. If you want more, please join my community membership. For only $30 a year, you get access to all of these recordings. We've got a library of just about 30 different guest lectures from over the last 3, 4 years, and they are excellent, very high quality lectures. If you're interested if something in this discussion sparked something in you, maybe you want, and maybe you understand, oh my gosh, I'm doing it wrong. Maybe you need a private consultation to help you weed through all this information and apply it to your horse. To do that, please go to my website. Top right-hand corner, there's going to be a button that says schedule a discovery call, and that's where you start if you're interested in a private consultation. And I have many courses available, especially this spring. I've got several on-demand courses that you can start at any time. I have a do-it-yourself, self-guided nutrition practice course coming up in April, so check that out. And here's just a few of our awesome courses and guest lectures coming to you this spring. Thank you for sticking through this with me. If you have questions, please email me at oncourseequinutrition@gmail.com, and have a great rest of your day.